Russian oil imports?
Nothing is off the table.
Nothing off the table. President Biden keeping open the option of sanctioning Russian oil exports, even as the cost continues to climb. Oil prices have jumped to their highest level since 2011, topping over $113 a barrel. So what does that do? It impacts the price of gas. And who better to talk about that than our Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. Secretary Buttigieg, I want to thank you for staying up late with us because we've got a lot to cover. And you know we're going to start with gas prices. Already an issue. Any person in this country with a car is talking about it, complaining about it. And the thing is, prices are only going to go up. What tangible things can this administration do to address it now?
Yeah, we're seeing this pain at the pump. As you know, gas prices are based on oil prices. Oil prices go up when there's volatility and uncertainty in the world. Obviously, there's a lot of that right now, especially with the consequences of Russia's attack on Ukraine. There are options available to the president, and he's been exercising those options. For example, not just alone, by the way, but with several other countries, putting together a strategic release of petroleum from reserves in order to help stabilize that oil market. Now, the truth is, I think a lot of folks sometimes overstate the influence that any one politician can have on gas prices, that even an official in a leadership role like the President of the United States can have. And yet the president has asked for, sought, and exercised options that are making a difference. I think you're going to continue to see a range of options. And at the same time, I want to zoom out a little bit here because there was a very powerful message from the president last night about what we can do to ease the costs that Americans are feeling across the board. No matter what's happening with the ups and downs of gas prices in this moment or in any moment, we know that we can save American families thousands of dollars a year with very specific actions that are absolutely under the control of policymakers in Washington. Lowering the cost of insulin, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, lowering the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, on, with very specific proposals that the president has put before Congress. And if they send them to the president, he'll sign them right away. Costs will go down for American families across the board.
I hear you, sir, but those are long-term solutions for bigger issues. And you know we live in a short-term world, so I just want to stay on gas for another moment. And you're absolutely right. The president doesn't set the price of gas, but he can influence it. And while releasing some strategic reserves matters, given how much has been released, it's really just a drop in the bucket. Are there things like, and I realize it is controversial, it has huge environmental impacts, could the president possibly consider authorizing the Keystone Pipeline, working something out with Iran?
I mean, look, the president has said that all options are on the table, but we also need to make sure that we're not galloping after permanent solutions to immediate short-term problems where more strategic and tactical actions in the short term can make a difference, like what you have with the Strategic Reserve, which exists partly in order to respond to situations like this. And of course, the president's laid out policies that are going to help cushion the impacts of any volatility in energy markets for the future by building up more of a diversified and homegrown energy base for this country. Look, we don't know what the next curveball is going to be affecting oil prices, affecting the global energy markets, from a pandemic to a war. Anything can happen any given day. And the president's been working to make sure that Americans, to the extent possible, are protected from those effects.
The next curveball could be a cyber attack. You dealt with the Colonial Pipeline hack last year. What are you doing right now to protect our transportation infrastructure?
Well, one of the biggest lessons of the Colonial Pipeline hack was it was a reminder of how a great deal of the critical infrastructure in this country is actually in private or non-federal hands. And so our focus really has been working with those who do control or own or operate so much critical infrastructure, whether we're talking about pipelines, whether we're talking about water and wastewater utilities, transportation assets, to make sure that they understand their responsibilities to communicate with each other together about best practices and to communicate with the U.S. government when they come under attack so that there can be a response. Of course, we work to make sure that anything that is federally owned and operated is secure, but this is something that in many ways is in its infancy. As we look across the 2020s, 30s, 40s, and beyond, we're only going to see more, I think, attempts and vulnerabilities. Look, technology is going to play more and more of a role in transportation than it already does. You look at even just a car, and it is increasingly a piece of technology as much as it is a piece of machinery. We've got to make sure that those technologies are secure.
Mask mandates are being lifted. School children around the world are cheering. But I want to ask how that relates to transportation, planes, trains. Are we going to be wearing masks forever?
You know, I think all of us are looking forward to a time when we can leave the masks at home when we're packing for a trip. We're not there yet. There hasn't been any change to the guidance that's currently in effect. And you can imagine why. If you think about the guidance that thankfully has come out that's allowed us in a lot of different places, in Washington, for example, where the transmission is considered low, to move into kind of a new stage with regard to these masks. You got a plane, you might have 100 different people from 99 different counties, some of which are low, some of which are high, some of which are in between. And so the strategy is a little bit different. But I can tell you, I'm among those who will be really relieved and appreciative when we are able to put this in the rearview mirror. And I know that the TSA is looking, as they always do, looking at the CDC guidance, which I do think will continue to be updated and revised based on the conditions on the ground, based on what we've learned, and based on the success that this country has had in using tools like vaccines and the emerging therapies like the pill, the treatment that the president was talking about to protect Americans from this virus.
I know you don't have a hard date, but you said you're really looking forward to that day. Any idea when that might be? 6 weeks, 6 months?
You know, I can't predict it right now. I'll just say that when that day comes, I'll be as glad as anybody in the traveling public. Although, remember, what would happen when there's a change is likely similar to what's happening in communities around the country, which is that, of course, the recommendation shifts or the requirement shifts for it to be optional. Some people may be more comfortable for a very long time, choosing to continue to wear a mask. And, of course, that's fine. But the question about how long it's going to be required, that's going to continue to be based on the findings of the CDC.
On that day, you will be smiling, and we'll see it because your mask will be in the trash. Secretary Buttigieg, thank you for joining us this evening. It's almost midnight, and you probably have a couple of babies to feed.
We'll see if they're awake when I get home.
We know how it works with newborns. Thank you for joining us. Coming up.